Good evening and welcome to Arizona Illustrated for Wednesday, June 6, 2012. The Republican governor of Wisconsin has survived a controversial and heated recall election that some analysts predict may serve as a prelude to this November's presidential race. Ahead of that, however, Arizona is also set to receive some national attention because local voters will soon be picking a replacement for former Democratic Representative Gabrielle Giffords in Congressional District 8. The pressure is on, and so are the ads and activism. Political reporters Christopher Conover and Andrea Kelly are here to tell us about the vital days before this pivotal election. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Tony.
And let's begin with you, Andrea. So already we're hearing from the analysts about what Wisconsin could mean for President Obama.
That's right. And a lot of people are remarking on the fact that Obama chose not to campaign there on behalf of the Democrat who lost last night. And it's getting some attention, but we're also hearing about Obama's role in Arizona. There's some conversation about whether the Obama campaign thinks Arizona could be a swing state, wants to swing it to be to vote for Democrats in the presidential election. And we're seeing that filter down into our congressional and Senate races. Actually, in our U.S. Senate race, we're seeing that there's some criticism today from the Arizona Republican Party that Democrat Richard Carmona was recruited to run for U.S. Senate by Obama, but now he's backing away. And we've also been covering this in our Congressional District 8 coverage, criticism towards Ron Barber that he is backing away from supporting President Obama. So all of these national things are filtering down into local politics.
So it was a tight race 2 years ago, Christopher, between Gabrielle Giffords and Jesse Kelly. And now, of course, we don't have Gabby in the picture. What do you see coming out here in the next few days? Election day, 6 days away.
This is going to be, by everyone's estimation, a pretty tight race. And I can give you a little bit of an idea, kind of personal experience. It's not often we get to talk about our personal experiences on the air. As a political reporter, I'm a registered independent, and I had my mail-in ballot. And over the weekend, I had two visitors come to my house. One from the Democratic Party and one from the Kelly campaign, both very nicely, just making sure that I still had my ballot and wanted to make sure it got voted and things like that. So they are very interested in both campaigns, in those independent votes like mine. Also, as an independent, my mailbox, this is what I've gotten in the last couple of weeks, mailers, and it comes from the Kelly campaign, the Barber campaign, the Democratic Party, the Republican Party, Crossroads PAC, all these different mailers coming to my home, which as a political reporter is great. I've gotten to see all this. But they're very, very interested in those independent voters.
And I know you spoke to an expert a few days ago about whether they really have an impact, these mailers. What did she say?
It was interesting. We did. We spoke with Dr. Kate Kensky. It was about a week ago. It's still up on our website as far as I know. And we were talking about the effectiveness. And some of these mailers can be effective. She was saying some, not so much, but others can be very, very effective.
And Andrew, how much interest has there been so far as the ballots and the early ballot returns?
We have actually quite a bit of interest. Our Pima County recorder is saying that there have been record returns so far in Congressional District 8. People are getting their ballots and they're voting and they're sending those ballots back. Sometimes people wait a little longer to weigh in or turn in their ballot on Election Day. So far, about half the people in Pima County are automatically receiving early ballots because they've signed up to get a ballot for every election. About 33% of the total voters in the district have already weighed in on this election, voting their early ballots. Some people are saying that's happening because there's only one race on the ballot this time with a special election. You don't have to wade through a bunch of other candidates in other races. So that's coming in. But what we also are seeing is that the Republicans and the Democrats are weighing in. The independents, the people who are not affiliated with any party, are the ones who are actually kind of waiting a little longer, trying to make that decision. And the latest numbers we have show about 60% turnout from just those early voters in the Republican and Democratic Party, and about 40-50% with those independents. So, and when you compare those to all the people who did not get the early ballots, who will be voting on Election Day, that's where you get the 33% turnout. And again, polls are open on Election Day, so you don't have to vote early. If you didn't get a ballot in the mail, you can still vote on Tuesday at your normal polling place, and that's available online to find where that location is.
And Tony, it should be noted that these are Pima County numbers. The district is more than Pima County. It's Santa Cruz and Cochise also, and they are having returns. They just aren't having quite the levels that Pima's having, which has 80% of the voters. So.
And Christopher, I know more and more we hear about so many races across the country are becoming the most expensive ever, in part because of television and the ads that have to go on in today's races. we have some examples of how that money is being spent locally.
We do, and it should be noted, especially with this first ad that we're going to run, this is not an ad from one of the campaigns. This is an ad from the National Republican Congressional Campaign. It's an outside group, and that's where a lot of the money coming in is from, these PACs and super PACs. So this first ad is from the NRCC. Let's take a look.
Our next congressman must challenge Washington. But what has Ron Barber's campaign promised?
Of course, Ron has supported and will support President Obama.
Obamacare, a national energy tax, lost jobs, more debt? Of course, Ron Barber supported it. So can we trust Barber to challenge Washington? Of course not. Rubber stamp Ron Barber. More failed Obama policies that hurt Arizona. The National Republican Congressional Committee is responsible for the content of this advertising.
So obviously in this election season, at least, a lot of people are tying somebody to the president. And in this case, of course, the president is not that popular, at least in Arizona.
That's what the Republicans are hoping people see in that ad. And so again, yeah, that's an example of tying Ron Barber, the Democrat in the race, to President Obama. Now he's, you could say he's tried to distance himself a little bit from that. I mean, he has not said whether he would support what Republicans call Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act, the health care reform. Ron Barber hasn't said that. He also wouldn't say at a recent debate, he did not say whether he would vote, who he would vote for president. And that's what this ad is largely based on. The Ron Barber campaign's response to that a few days later, or the next day, I think, was, of course he'll vote for Obama. And that's what they based this ad on. We also have another ad coming in. Again, this is from an outside political action committee. This is from the House Majority PAC. It's a Democratic political action committee that's trying to win the majority back from the Republicans this fall. And this one is an anti-Jesse Kelly ad. Let's take a look at that.
Extreme ideas from Jesse Kelly.
The corporate tax rate should be zero. We must take steps to lower and eventually eliminate the minimum wage.
Social Security and Medicare is the biggest Ponzi scheme in history.
And 2 years ago, Kelly said this about Gabby Giffords.
And now she stands there with that smile and pretends to be some kind of hometown hero. She's a hero of nothing.
Do you really want Jesse Kelly representing you? The House Majority PAC is responsible for the content of this advertising.
So that's pretty serious terminology being used there.
It is, and what's interesting about this ad, I've talked to some political operatives, if you will, some campaign folks that are involved in this campaign and in some of the other campaigns. And it was the last set of statements that really piqued their interest, where Jesse Kelly appears to attack now former Congresswoman Giffords and says she's not a hero. Obviously, we know what this ad is going after. It should be noted, though, in defense of Mr. Kelly, that he said that in 2010. He's not talking about the former Congresswoman since the shooting, and it says that in the ad, and it has it in big numbers, 2010, but they are definitely playing on the emotion there. And talking to some Republican campaign folks not involved with the Kelly campaign, they were pretty surprised by this ad. The Kelly campaign, we talked to them right after this ad came out earlier this week. They really didn't say much about it at this point, but there are some in the Republican Party that are not happy about this ad.
And Andrea, so this is interesting because we have this race right now in June, or this election in June, for a district that's actually going to disappear rather quickly. So what is the timeline here for these districts?
It's complicated.
Okay.
What we're looking at is, yes, this is Congressional District 8, Arizona's 8th district. The election is Tuesday. Whoever wins this election will be the congressman from District 8 from that day until the term ends in very early January. So this is a 6-month, finish out the rest of the term. Whichever of these gentlemen wins, if they want to serve a full 2-year term, they will be running for re-election in the fall, which is actually just August. It turns right around into the next cycle. They'll be running in August. Both of them have said they will run again because they both want the office. So in August, we'll have a primary. There are some competitors coming up for them in that race, and then in November, we'll have a general from who gets out of those primaries. That, though, is in Congressional District 2, which looks similar to what District 8 looks like. It's Cochise County, Pima County, although there will be more registered Democrats than Republicans, which is a shift for that new District 2.
So hypothetically, we could have a winner for 6 months, and then we have a new person if somebody else is reelected. And finally, Election Day, Tuesday, times and places?
Election Day Tuesday, all the polls are open in District 8. If you don't live in District 8, you just get to sit back and watch this one. Polls will close at 7. We'll start seeing numbers around 8 o'clock. And, of course, we'll have numbers for you here on our website and on our sister radio station, KUAZ. And we'll wrap it up the next night with you sitting right here.
Okay, thanks so much. Today marks the 68th anniversary of D-Day, when more than 150,000 troops landed along a stretch of heavily fortified French coastline to fight Nazi Germany on the beaches of Normandy. Here's a brief look back at this significant event during World War II.
But for the Americans in the 1st and 29th Infantry Divisions approaching Omaha Beach, the most difficult landing site, almost everything would go wrong. Omaha was the broadest of the 5 beaches and the deepest, with 100 yards of pebbles, then sand dunes, barbed wire and thick undergrowth. All of it heavily mined. Behind all that loomed formidable bluffs fortified by 2,000 German troops, many of them battle-seasoned veterans. Stützpunkts, or strongholds, overlooked the 4 gullies that led inland, each manned by 70 Germans with machine guns, mortars, and armor-piercing howitzers, all zeroed in on the men about to try to come ashore. During Phase 2, American pilots had dropped most of their bombs miles inland. There were no bomb craters in which to take shelter, and the naval bombardment had barely dented German defenses.
As we are approaching it, we see ships to the right of us, ships to the left of us. The skies are loaded with the flying balloons. The battleships are shooting, and you could see the projectiles, the 14-inch projectiles from the battle wagons, going through the air. The smell of powder. We didn't know what we were going to hit when we got in there.
Men had been transferred to their landing craft 12 miles from shore, and while it was still dark, so that many boats lost their proper positions going in. The sea was rough. The men, most of whom had had no sleep, were wet and cold and seasick.
Now we bring you a story from a 93-year-old World War II veteran who lives in Green Valley and was involved in the Allied invasion of Normandy 68 years ago. U.S. Air Force retired Lieutenant Colonel Charles Bates was one of the key individuals who participated in preparing the forecast on D-Day. This segment is produced by reporter Luis Carrion and photojournalist Stephen Riggs.
My job as a surf forecaster was to listen to the total weather forecast discussions, and then at the end come up with the sea swell and surf conditions, write them down in a note, and then the Royal Navy forecaster on duty would send that by phone to Eisenhower's headquarters. That's the way it got into the system. There was a very critical debate. He decided, based on the forecast, to delay 24 hours and go in behind the weather front And of course, that was the smartest thing he ever did, because at the time he made the decision, it was raining and the winds were around 25, 30 knots. It would have been impossible to operate on the English Channel. On the other hand, the Germans had seen the same weather and decided anybody would be crazy to invade in such weather. And the weather so bad that the Germans didn't even know we were coming until about 4 o'clock that morning, when we were already starting to anchor to unload the landing craft. When I went over to the Omaha beachhead to ask them whether our wave forecasts are any value, why the Navy captain said no, he just keeps a sharp eye on the glass. They meant on the barometer. And of course, the storm that really gave us a problem was a case of high atmospheric pressure rather than low atmospheric pressure. On the other hand, the U.S. Army was very dependent on ducks, which were mobile amphibious trucks. As soon as we got a sea breeze there in the afternoon, the waves got 4 foot. It was too hard to unload 1-ton cargo slings into a bouncing duck, just like you put on top of a driver and instead of the back in a cargo space. So they became very interested because their cutoff point on wave height about 4 feet. The requirements were very tight because the idea was that we would invade at low tide and get rid of all these obstacles. The Germans, on the other hand, thought we were going to go invade at high tide, and it had to be the right kind of moon for the dropping the paratroops. They were moving about 70,000 troops a day across that, and at the same time they were trying to build artificial harbors, both the Americans and the British. And there was really no shortage of ships to unload, as you can see from a panoramic view of the beachhead. That was the largest amphibious invasion ever planned. It was going to involve about 4,000 combat ships and 180,000 sailors. And their job was, I said, to put roughly 135,000 men ashore by sea in one day, and then by 10 days have 500,000 people ashore with 100,000 vehicles. Of course, the English Channel was a very bad stretch of water because it was subject to storms, high tides of the order of 20 feet between high and low tide, and very bad tidal currents. So that wasn't going to be an easy task.
A national organization with local chapters in different communities is trying to take as many World War II veterans as possible to Washington, D.C. so they can see the World War II Memorial in their honor. Here in southern Arizona, the group is looking for more community participation to try to make this dream come true. Mark McLemore joins us with an interview about Honor Flight Tucson.
Joining us now to talk about the work done by Honor Flight Tucson, we have the vice president of that group. Her name is Barbara K. Brownlee, and she's here along with a volunteer, Anne Marie Neal, who went on her first trip with Honor Flight last November. And we'll ask her about that in just a moment. But first, Barb, could you outline the service that Honor Flight provides for World War II veterans?
Honor Flight provides a 3-day trip to the World War II Memorial and all the memorials in Washington, D.C. for our men and women from World War II. It's an awesome 3-day trip. We provide over-the-top experience for each one of those. As you can imagine, waiting 65 years to be honored for something that you didn't receive when you came home. It's a party happening when we get these men and women in D.C.
And I've heard that an honor guard will greet them at the airport and send them off.
That is correct. Each time we fly, we get a little bigger. Wednesday is D-Day, so that is why we're having such a party at the airport. There will be 2 D-Day survivors with us on the trip. So there will be an honor guard, there will be bagpipes, there'll be food, there'll be festivities, there'll be crying. It'll be just a big happening in Tucson at 4 o'clock in the morning.
Well, funding for so many nonprofit groups is difficult to come by these days. How is Honor Flight able to make this trip available to these vets?
All our donations are private donations at this time, so it's folks in the community and VFWs, American Legions, a high school student's going to have a car wash for us. Those are how we receive our funds. We receive no federal funding. It's all from private donations in southern Arizona.
And so we're talking about southern Arizona here because Honor Flight Tucson is dealing with this area of the state. How many other Honor Flight programs are in existence around our country?
There's about 110 across America, all doing what we're doing, flying veterans to Washington, D.C.
How long has the Tucson branch been in operation now?
We're just a little over a year old. We were a year in March, so we're fairly new in the nonprofit fundraising world.
And in that time, how many flights and maybe how many vets do you think you have taken to the memorial?
This will be our 5th flight, and we've probably flown 125 veterans with about 160 and growing on our wait list.
I see. Well, Anne-Marie, talk about your volunteer experience with this group. I understand that you went on a trip to see the memorial last November.
I did. I saw Channel 4 was doing some advertising and they needed some guardians. So I responded, and I didn't know what I was getting myself into, but it was the most rewarding experience I've ever had. I was assigned a veteran, and it's funny how things happen. My veteran wasn't actually the one I was assigned to, and I last minute trade, and he was in the Navy just like my dad, and he was a signalman just like my dad. My dad was in World War II too, so I also kind of do this in honor of my dad and his brothers.
Well, your volunteer position, you said, is described as a guardian. So what does that entail exactly? What are you there to provide these veterans with?
I'm there to make sure that they have everything they need, anticipate their every need. My veteran, Jerry, had oxygen and needed a wheelchair for long journeys, so I was in charge of his oxygen and just whatever he needed or wanted. There were some days on the trip the day we were there, it was a little bit rainy and he didn't want to get off the bus, so he sent me out to take pictures. I was at his beck and call.
And tell us a little bit about the trip itself. It seems like it might be somewhat of an arduous journey.
It is. It went by, yes, there was a lot to do. It went by really fast. It's very well organized. Everything ran so smoothly. The vets were so excited. The greetings, the welcomes that they got wherever we went just kind of kept them going, gave them that boost that they needed. Nobody ever complained about being too tired or anything. They were incredible.
What about some of the impacts, Barb, that you've seen on veterans who returned from this trip? I mean, what do you think that it's meant to some of the veterans to visit the memorial?
It means the world to them. Some of them leave and their wives tell me they've been depressed, and since they've had our call, they are a different person. When they come home, they are like 10 years younger because they have been honored all across America. So to them, it's the trip of a lifetime. I hear that over and over. This means so much to me, and thank you for doing that.
Well, to some vets who may be watching or people who have veterans in their family, how can they get in contact with Honor Flight? What should they know before reaching out to you?
They can contact us at our website, or they can call us on our phone line, and 520-204-1391. That's how they can get in touch with us, and we will take care of their needs.
Okay. Well, so what is the future of Honor Flight? How many vets in southern Arizona do you think you still need to reach out to?
That's a hard figure for us to find out because we can't get to that source, and we're kind of a double-edged sword. Do we want to market and have more waiting? Because these veterans have been waiting 2 years to go to take, because we only take 36 veterans at a time to keep it very personal for them. So we can grow, but it just makes us have to raise more money and have the veterans wait long.
So at this point, you do have a 2-year waiting list.
It's about 1.5 to 2 years wait list, unless we find those Mr. Deep Pockets, and then we'll do what we have to do.
Well, thanks for coming and sharing with us about Honor Flight. I'm sure it's news to a lot of people in our community that this is going on. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Early this morning, a new group of people from Honor Flight Tucson embarked on the historic and emotional journey to Washington, D.C. Photographer and editor Heather Woodridge joined them at Tucson International Airport, and she brings us tonight's video postcard.
Honor Flight is a national organization with local hubs in over 100 cities, and we fly World War II vets back to visit their memorial at no cost to them.
Have a good trip. Thank you.
Today, being the 68th anniversary of D-Day, we wanted to do a little extra, and so DM was kind enough to provide us with their honor guard.
I'm here because I was a veteran. I joined the Women's Auxiliary Corps first, and then the Army decided to take us.
I was down at the Veterans Hospital, and one of the nurses there had asked me if I had been on the honor flight, and I said no. I said, I don't think I deserve it.
They're so humble about everything they did. They don't even realize they did anything so fantastic. And we hand out flags, and everybody yells and claps and waves their flags as they make their way down to the security area. And then from there, we come on up here until they're ready to board.
I never had so much attention in my life. All I ever did is what they told me to do as far as a service personnel.
A lot of them have been to D.C., but they haven't seen their memorial. The memorial was not established until 2004. And that was 60 years after the war ended.
You might teach them a thing or two.
It was just our way of telling these gentlemen, and we have one lady on the flight, that thank you for our freedom, thank you for the job that you did so long ago. It's our privilege to be able to send you on this flight.
Coming up tomorrow night, the film industry used to be a major contributor to Arizona's economy, but it's been losing its luster for several years. Is there hope for the future? Also, the Arizona-Mexico Commission is meeting in Tucson. We'll get some economic data about both places. I'm Tony Paniagua from all of us at Arizona Public Media. Have a great night.